I'm sorry that I can't have a live chat this week, but I'm in meetings all day on Monday, and it wouldn't be possible to do a live chat. So I'm going to do this recording. And we're in Chapter 7 now, which talks about how we create questionnaires and put the questions together. So the first half, we're going to talk about how we write the questionnaire, and this involves deciding what we want to measure. And so these are things that we're learning in the course. And we have to produce questions that will accurately and adequately measure the variables that we're interested in. We want to assemble the questions in logical order, and we usually pre-test the questions and then actually conduct a pilot study. So key steps. First of all, do we really need a survey? If we do, we're going to create a model that will guide the development of the survey questions, and in that model we want to identify the variables that we want to measure. And we want to review the questions using a qualitative approach to determine reliability, pre-test, we mentioned that before, pilot, and then analyze the pilot data so at least you get some idea of the sensitivity of the measures. So investigators want to identify and link the variables needed to answer a question or solve a problem. And prior to building the model, you need to know why the model is being built. What's the purpose of the survey? Who will be the primary users? And how will the primary users use the study to answer questions or solve a problem? And is the survey actually the best way to collect the data? Now let's talk about the types of questions we can have. We can have factual questions, and these elicit objective information from the respondents. Things like demographics, money goal for a fundraiser, time required to obtain a building permit. Behavior questions ask people about things they do or they have done. How far do you travel to work? Do you volunteer? Things like that. We also have opinion questions. What do people think about things? We can have attitude questions, and we can have motive questions. Knowledge questions. How much does a person know about something? This is similar to test question, and this can also be help you filter out uninformed respondents or maybe people that really don't even belong in your survey. And we can use these to evaluate training programs. The question wording, the emphasis, and the order have a greater effect on opinion and attitude questions than on factual questions. The respondent must understand what information is being solicited. For example, if we look at this question here, does any member of your family belong to a union? What does it mean by family? Does that mean just the people living in your immediate household, your extended family? How about the word union? What kind of a union are we talking about? A labor union, a credit union? So if somebody says yes to this question, we really don't know what that yes means. Likewise, they say no. If there are words that you're going to use that are not clearly understandable, you may want to put in parentheses, any member of your family, people living in your immediate household, belong to a credit union, a labor union. How many questions do you need to measure a variable? And that's a great question. The number of questions will affect the measure's reliability. You want to keep the questions to a minimum. You don't want your survey to be too long, and you also don't want to lose the interest of the person completing it. However, you're going to have a trade-off between lower reliability and higher response rate. The number of questions also affects the operational validity. Many variables require more than one indicator or question. For organizational data, the number of questions and operational validity are really a special concern. Organizational or program effectiveness requires more than a single indicator. Measures with inadequate content can seriously distort employee behavior. Now again, we're talking about collecting information on an organization. So you want to be very, very careful how you put those together. Staff could focus on one question or one indicator to the detriment of other equally important indicators. And they may also actually answer the way that they think you want them to answer rather than how they really feel. And we also have other kinds of questions called open-ended questions where the respondent responds or answers in their own words. This helps you to identify a possible range of answers, avoid biases that a list could introduce. You get rich, detailed comments. Respondents can elaborate. Easier to answer some questions with a few words rather than selecting from a long list. So if we ask, for instance, what state do you live in, rather than having a drop-down menu with 50 choices, we could just do a free text field, open-ended, and let them type in Florida. Drawbacks. Complicate data collection. So again, if you think about this, type in the word Florida, people might just type in FL, FLA, the whole word. They might spell it wrong. And a lot of times people don't answer questions where they have to type something in. These are really valuable in the early stages of questionnaire design because they can help you gather the variety of responses that can be then used to create close-ended questions. Especially helpful in political polling. Early in the campaign, pollsters will ask respondents to name who they prefer, or maybe they ask them to give their top three. And this will allow the pollster to determine candidates with early support and avoid the situation where respondents select a familiar name. So you have them type in the names, not just pick from a list. As we get closer to Election Day, obviously we use close-ended questions. Issues with open-ended. The respondent must be motivated to spend time and effort to answer the question. Investigators tend to overemphasize or overestimate, rather, the importance of their work and then the survey respondents' willingness to provide those detailed answers. Respondents may avoid questions that require a long written response, and respondents may be more likely to answer open-ended in person or on the phone rather than on the internet or on a mail survey. Again, though, training would have to be critical for those interviews. So how do we use the information effectively? If few people are surveyed, the answers may be carefully read and analyzed. If many people are surveyed, the probability of carefully reading, again, we're still talking about the open-ended here, reading all the answers diminishes. Sometimes there's a random sample taken of the open-ended to do a detailed analysis. And we also have to categorize and count the answers to make sense out of them, and that's going to take a lot of time. So to ensure reliability, investigators should apply a test-retest to a random sample of cases. And if several analysts are categorizing, we can do some inter-rater reliability. Now the close-ended. This is where you give the respondent a list of options to select from. Sometimes we say select all that apply. Unchecked item may not apply or may have been overlooked. List where a response is requested for each item. List can include an other, which doesn't guarantee the other responses will be mentioned, but respondents might limit themselves to those listed if they don't have an other option, or they may refuse to answer the question also. So the list may or may not include other, no opinion, not sure, or not applicable. A forced choice one includes an even number of responses. This is like on a Likert scale question where we're asking you to rank something. If you don't include a neutral, so if you have strongly disagree, strongly disagree, disagree, agree, strongly agree, the respondent's forced to pick. There's no neutral option there, and people may skip that. So you want to include a neutral response. We usually say on Likert scales you should have an odd number of choices because that means you'll have a neutral. One example, 7.2, an example in the textbook. What is your opinion of why some employees do not join SEA? Check all that apply. And we have choices like money, dislike organizations, SEA doesn't adequately represent employees, don't consider their jobs permanent, don't care, don't know. If the respondent has never tried to recruit new members, would they really be able to answer this question? How about this one? Number the following in order of priority, 1 being highest, 2 being next highest, etc. SEA should work for, and then there's a list of, looks like 7 choices there. Are the directions clear? What are we basing the priority on? Priority to you, priority in terms of money. They really haven't given much guidance in terms of how they want that priority done. Some of the issues with closed-ended questions. They could encourage the respondent to accept the investigator response categories. If you don't give them an other or let them type in a choice, then you're forcing them to pick one of the categories or one of the responses that you've selected. Investigators may assume that they and the respondents interpret the questions and the response choices in the same way. Again, it's critical to pretest close-ended questions to allow review of the item reliability and operational validity. So what should you choose? Depends on the type of information, who is supplying it, how we're collecting it, and how much time we have. Open-ended are important again in the initial stages. They might be in the first iteration of a questionnaire that will then lead us to come up with some good close-ended questions. Less interested, less motivated respondents may avoid, again, answering those open-ended questions. Mail surveys and interviewers may be the best way for open-ended questions. Close-ended questions can be compiled and analyzed more quickly. And you don't want to waste people's time asking questions unless you've actually planned out the analysis. Filter questions are very useful. These identify people who should answer follow-up questions, and these are nearly always close-ended questions. Some example might be if you were doing a political poll, the first question might be, what is your political affiliation? Conservative, liberal, independent, and that might then give a series of questions based on the response to that. We call that a filter. An effective format on the survey leaves the respondent to questions that he or she should answer. It's also called branching. Paper survey uses visual coding or arrows to direct. We're going to look at an example in a minute. In an online survey, you can do this seamlessly. The questionnaire must be clear, have clear instructions, and be simple to follow. So here's an example from your book. They did a survey of citizens, including questions on educational policy, and they want to check compliance with requirements for periodic testing, contact between parents and teachers, and support for education-related policy. Questions on testing only apply to families with children in certain public schools. Question on parent-teacher relations apply only to families with children in school, and questions on the education-related policy would be all respondents, and this is done over the phone. The arrows save time as the interviewer selects the appropriate questions based on the respondent's answer. Since the survey questions apply only to families that meet certain criteria, there are visual cues here. So if you notice here, so the first question is, were there any children in your household enrolled in public school grades 1, 2, 3, 6, or 9? So if the answer is no children or no, then the branching here takes them all the way down to the last question. If the answer is yes, they're going to continue through. If the answer was don't know, again, it's going to kick them to the fourth question. And they get to question 2. So these are people with children in those grades. Did any of those last year take the annual achievement tests? If they said yes, they're going to continue to question 3. If they said no or don't know, they're going to go to question 4. Now again, on an internet survey, this can be done seamlessly because we have some conditional, what we call branching options based on the answer to the question, and then it would just automatically, if they said no here, take them down to this question without them even knowing that there were other questions on the survey. All right, and just for a second, I was going to pull up your, I've released your next project, which is also a group project, and it'll be due on the last week of class, the last Monday. And it's located in Chapter 7 in my courses, and it's under Survey Design Project. And let's just take a look at it. You've been assigned to a group to work together to complete this project survey. Here's the instructions, and in Chapter 7 you're learning about questionnaire design and question content, and you're going to design a survey. So the first thing is to pick a problem of interest, identify the population and the target population, how do they differ, design the survey. You have to have at least 6 questions. You want to have one of each type, factual, behavior, opinion, and knowledge, and you want to have at least one open-ended and one closed-ended, and one of your questions must collect quantitative data. For each question, identify whether it's the first question, a major question, or a demographic. Now, we're going to get into this in the second part of Chapter 7, so you will understand more about this with the material next week. List the orders of the questions and justify why you select that order, and there's a checklist in your book that can help you. How will you administer your survey? What will your sampling frame be? What kind of a sample will you use? And then how will you analyze the information? When we build a survey, we want to think about every question and how we're going to summarize and analyze the data from that question. Your team will prepare a PowerPoint which will be submitted to the Dropbox and graded as the project report. Here's the grading rubric, and then there's a little self-assessment. And I also put in the same location, the project groups are a little different this time, but they're listed right here. So you want to go ahead and check who's in your group so you can make contact with them. And again, this will be due on May 1st. The remaining project in the course will be in Chapter 8, and it's a solo project where you'll complete an online training module for human subjects protection. So we're getting close to the end of the semester, and you want to keep focused on completing all of your assignments moving forward. So hopefully this video will help you with the first part of Chapter 7.